So let's see here. Okay, test. Coming back. Back to Earth. All right, back to Earth now. Well, we get to dive into page 507. I'll tell you what, I haven't had a chance yet to check the italics in this. So if you're looking at your Alice Beatty CD-ROM or your book, and you see an italicized word that I don't have italicized here, because when I transfer the copy over to a Word file, I lose all the italics. So if you see an italicized something, just let me know, okay? Is that fair enough? That's nice of you. Thank you. What did I say, 567? Where did that begin? 560 something? Yes, right there. I got the first italicized word. He always italicizes the word, the titles of the books. So that's something. It's a little while. I don't see anything immediate. So if you see something, you let me know, okay? All right. Okay. The birth at Bethlehem, and this is, the seventh ray is active here, and it's really active in a big way. You can even have a seventh ray mind, which is quite a rare phenomenon at this time. The one time he really mentions the seventh ray mind is in relation to the first initiation, which I imagine, would memorize all the rules and try to think as he should in an orderly and proper manner, according to what is understood about the requirements of the initiation. There are many observances, and the doing the right thing physically, I think, would be very important for the seventh ray type, and the seventh ray mind would help with that. I mean, I think I would find the list-making mind. I have a lot of definitions of this, at least by conjecture, in the tapestry books. But it is interesting that he discusses the seventh ray mind as a possibility. You wouldn't expect to find it, and really I don't even know whether I can re-find it. It was let's see, the et cetera, might be. Well, I won't go looking for that. I mean, I know it exists. It's I just have to let it go. And it's hard to let it go, but I just have to take my word for it. There's two references to the seventh ray mind, and they both of them are in relation to the first initiation. It's an initiation, as we were discussing, that has Leo either rising or as the sun sign, because the knowledge of the higher self begins there, and Leo in this case represents the second stage of selfhood. It is the higher correspondence to individualization. It is the beginning of spiritual individualization, the emergence as a spiritual identity. Remember, we just had isolated individuality, isolated identity, isolated unity. All of them have a lot to do with Leo. So it is the first phase of the work within the kingdom of souls. You enter the hall of wisdom, as it were, in the preliminary stages at the first initiation, and Leo gives that indication of the solar illumination that you will begin to find. It's the birth of the solar self in its initial phases. It's the sun god, coming into expression, born out of the mother aspect. Leo somehow is associated, with God the Son. Aries, God the Father, Leo, God the Son, Sagittarius more with the Holy Spirit and with the material aspect, with the lunar, Sagittarius as ruler of the lunar lords. Well, we discussed yesterday the various signs connected with the first initiation, and we have a lot on that, but we don't need to go into it right now. It's enough to know that Gemini is said to be involved, Leo, of course, Virgo, Scorpio is active at all the first three initiations. Sagittarius is said to rule initiates of the first and second degree. Capricorn rules all 5 initiations. I don't think you're going to find Aquarius so much, except for the opposite to Leo. It's the entry into a kind of group consciousness, but Aquarius is not one of those signs so much emphasized with the first degree, except that Aquarius has to do with the etheric body, which becomes the master over the physical body at that point. So Uranus over Saturn, as it were, could give an Aquarian indication for the first degree. And like I said about Pisces, it's the sign that is found when we're making the transition from the latter part of the mutable cross onto the first part of the fixed cross. I don't know if there's any signs which, if present in the horoscope, would prevent the taking of a particular initiation. It's just that the likelihood is greater when you have certain signs, perhaps. And then, of course, it's not just the signs themselves, it's the planet which represents the signs, because certain planets are powerful at certain initiations, like Uranus, Vulcan, and Pluto are powerful at the first initiation. So in a way, you can draw lines from those planets which are implicated to the signs with which they are most associated, which would, of course, take in Aquarius for Uranus. It would even take in Libra, given the esoteric ruler of Libra is Uranus, and by the time you're an initiate of the first degree, you can begin to be using esoteric rulers. So the whole balancing of the energy system could come in with Uranus and Libra. Well, I just did what I said I wouldn't do. I said I wouldn't get into all these signs and stuff, and I'm not getting in any depth. But the principle is that if initiation is imminent, there are many ways in the horoscope to achieve that initiation. We do know how important initiation is, how important astrology is for initiation. And DK even says that even though you may be initiate and fully capable of being initiated, if the astrological circumstances, I suppose in terms of progressions and directions, do not, and trances do not correspond, you may have to wait until another life to take that initiation. The poor Buddha had to wait for another solar system. Well, actually, maybe just another chain. It's a matter of the number of billions of years. Yeah, that's right. Taurus is quite a contradiction because, it has, in a way, a great resistance to move, and yet it can be, with the charge of the bull, quite an impatient sign. You think of it, the placid Taurus, and the flowers are growing, and the grass and the trees are taking their time, and no problem. But the bull also sees red and has a fiery temper, and there's another side to it. And when a bull is charging toward you, you don't say, patience, patience, because it's a deadly animal. It's one of the strongest of the animals. And sometimes you even see that among people, that the bull people who have a strong Taurus, they really are strong. Sometimes I can't tell what a person is, but I just kind of look at their shoulders and their upper body and I say Taurus, Of course, maybe it depends on the decanate, of course. So with respect to this chapter, let's get into it. I'm just trying to line up something to write with just in case. Whoops, that wasn't it. Okay. First of all, let us consider the type of energy which the seventh ray expresses, and wherein lies its potency and efficacy from the angle of initiation. As we study these initiations and their conditioning rays, we will divide our study into ideas into three parts. Now, you know, the sacral center is involved at the first initiation, and Uranus rules that sacral center, one of the planets. Actually, he actually gives this sacred planet Uranus as the ruler of the sacral center for both average man and for the disciple. But as we all know, Mars is much involved in the sacral center, and the moon, as the mother of the form, is also much involved. And as I say, people don't act as if. Most people in the world, they act as if their sacral center is sort of ruled by Mars, Venus. They don't act as if it's ruled by Uranus, unless we have quite a different definition of Uranus. Uranus is a reorienting planet. So if you want your sacral energy sent up to the throat, as at the first initiation, then Uranus, of course, is a very good ruler at that time. But when I observe people in general, I don't find that Uranus is the indicator of sacral energy in general. But, you know, time will tell. So we divide our ideas into three parts, he says. The type of energy and its quality in relation to the processes of the particular initiation with which it is associated. The type of energy and its quality in relation to the initiatory processes. Number two, its effect upon humanity regarding humanity as the world disciple. The seventh ray, he's concentrating mostly here on the ray, not on astrology. And also then the stimulating nature of the energy as it expresses itself. A, in the three aspects of the initiate's nature, mental, astral, and physical, and B, through the soul-infused personality of the initiate in good standing, a phrase of the deepest occult implications. In good standing means, yeah, you paid your dues, you can come in. That's the conventional, oh, you're up to date, you fulfilled your financial obligation to the lodge or something. But the initiate stands within the good. So he stands within the downflow of the archetype. The good is the archetype. So he says it has, a true initiate always stands within the good, and thus he is in good standing in good. I want to somehow make this a little bit bigger. I have a problem here. I'm going to increase the size of the font. It's not big enough yet. And I run a risk, of course, because of my fussy computer. No offense. Okay. All right. That ought to be big enough. Okay. Ceremonial magic. There's so much about the seventh ray which starts the process out, the first initiation, starting the process out in good form. It's so important to initiates of the first degree to be in good form and to do things correctly, as the spiritual advisors or books or Bibles or whatever say they should be done, to conform exactly to the rules. And I think that's a good start, because sometimes later we tend to forget those things and we lose our impression of the value of conformity. Conformity is extremely important, and also freedom is important. Are those two ideas which are necessarily contradictory, conformity and freedom? What do you think? I know you think something. I know what you think. Well, you know, if you conform to the higher laws, you will certainly have freedom within the lower worlds. These two factors must go together. The more we adhere to the will of God, which is represented by the laws of God, the more freedom we have within God. So it's the whole question about freedom and license. If you say, let me do anything I please, are you really free? You're pretty much just following the dictates of your elemental life, right? And that's bondage, isn't it? That's vice. That's not freedom at all. So it's a strange paradox, isn't it, that we must adhere so closely to the form of the law, higher law, in order really to express our spirit freely, because it brings the lower life under control, and it doesn't get in our way anymore. All right. Let's move on. So he's laying these out, 3 parts. It's the type of energy and how related to the initiatory processes, its effect upon humanity, and the stimulating nature of the energy, stimulating nature as it expresses itself in our 3 aspects and through the soul-infused personality. Now, you know, 7th ray is coming in now. 7th ray is connected with Uranus. Uranus rules the sacral center. 7th ray is associated with sex magic. There's a tremendous stimulation now of the sacral center of humanity in general. And hopefully some of that energy will be used in a Libran way, which would bring together people in a way that tended to enhance their individuality rather than just deal with the instinctual side of the sacral center. I think in the Western world that is happening. At this particular time in world history, 7th ray energy is of a growing potency because it is the new and incoming ray, superseding the 6th ray, which has for so long held sway. Now I want to say that, you know, you say, oh, of course the 7th ray is coming in because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. But that's not exactly, that's an incidental. The 7th ray coming in is following its own cycle. And it's an unusual cycle. It's not the same thing as a ray cycle. Every sign of the zodiac, when it is the ruler of a precessional age, is accompanied by a ray. And that ray may or may not be related to the sign of the zodiac. For instance, sometimes, you know, there's like a sequence. Well, the 6th ray ruled the age of Pisces, not because the 6th ray comes through Pisces, or because Neptune is associated with Pisces, simply because within larger cycles of which we know nothing, it was time for the 6th ray to come. Now, is there an order in the way the rays appear? There probably is, but I don't think we necessarily know it. We might be wrong if we think, oh, 6th ray was Pisces, 7th ray is Aquarius. Well, then obviously 1st ray is Capricorn. It might be, it might not be. But it would give you an idea that even though the major ray coming through Capricorn is what ray right now? Major Capricorn ray is? That is a ray, but the major ray is 7. Now, in a way, disciples receive their 3rd ray stimulus from Capricorn, so you're right in that sense. But in a planetary sense, and solar systemic sense, the 7th ray is the major ray. But, of course, Capricorn has 1st ray. Just imagine, if it was so, that the rays in their own 2,500-year cycles, and all of them, see, look, the 7 rays have different cycles, like, you know, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. These are all the 1st ray cycles, or 770, 700. Those are the 7th ray cycles, but it doesn't just go like that. The 5th ray cycles have to do with 5, 50, 500, 5,000. The 3rd ray cycles have to do with 3, 30, 300, 3,000, 30,000, so forth. The 4th ray cycle, Stephen Pugh seems to think they connect with the number 25. Maybe he's right, 25, 250, etc. And his theories, I think, you know, are probably the most far-reaching theories about these things that anybody has produced. That although the Tibetan hinted at the 6 ray cycles, 15, 150, 1500, and so forth. And then the 5th ray cycles is not like 5, 500. No, it's 35, 350, 3,500, 35,000, and so forth. So those are the numbers, both established and speculative, that are connected with the normal ray cycles. But in this other type of cycle, when a ray appears, it appears for 2,500 years. All of them, each one for 2,500 years. The sixth ray was with us for 2,500 years, accompanying Pisces, and the seventh ray will be for 2,500 years. And if the next ray up is the first ray, because it might just, who knows what the way of it is. It could go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Then it could go back to 3. In other words, there's lots of different ways that the cycles can occur. We don't know these things yet. But the important thing to realize is that in this independent ray cycle, accompanying the equatorial, what is the word, precessional ages, they all stay with us for the same amount of time, which shows that it is a different ray cycle from the cycle of the normal appearance of a ray. Let's just suppose it's ray 1 for Capricorn for 2,500 years. Wow, that's going to be a period of accomplishment. Ray 1 and Capricorn, a period of strong ability to take initiation, a period of great conflict between the light and the dark, a period when the will expand tremendously. See, the period of Aquarius and the seventh ray, what do we say? I mean, he writes a lot about it, but the whole idea of the manifestation of group consciousness and of the meaningful appearance of group within humanity, this is one of the major themes. Because 7 is manifestation, and Aquarius is the sign of the group and service. This is, he tells us, the 7th time since the beginning of the 5th root race that the 7th race cycle has coincided with the appearance of Aquarius as the ruler of the precessional age. So that's the 7th time in about 1,000,000 years. And that in itself is a big hint about how to calculate the ray cycles. I've never done it, but I know that one could follow that hint. It would be very interesting. Because what and here's an inference. If a precessional ray cycle of 2,500 years, literally 2,160 years, but by the time you deal with overlaps, you've got 2,500 years, is accompanied by a ray expressing for 2,500 years, then what about the 25,000 year cycle? Every Platonic year, after 12 precessional cycles, is called one Platonic year. DK conventionalizes the duration of a Platonic year as 25,000 years, but if you measure it by multiplying by 12, 22160, I think you get something like 25,900 and whatever. My calculator is here. Okay, here's my calculator. But my computer's so slow that it makes me, you could do it faster by hand. Okay, wait a second. This is incorrect. 2160 times 12 equals 920. That's it. 25,920 years. So there's a conventionalization of the duration of a Platonic year. But what we don't know, see, this is the interesting thing. The Earth has a tilt of its axis, 23 and a fraction. And if the Earth's axis changes its orientation or angle, will the Great Platonic Year become longer or shorter? So it may be that the Great Platonic Year, consisting of 12 times the precessional cycles, one cycle for each sign, can last of different durations, but is conventionalized as 25,000 years. Now, what if there's a ray accompanying the 25,000 years? What then? How interesting that not only do we have the 7th ray accompanying the 2,160 year cycle, But pretty soon, and he tells us we cannot tell when, but he says your science will not reveal that to you, but the 25,000-year Aquarian cycle has either begun or is about to begin. And what if a ray stays with us for 25,000 years on the basis of the Platonic year? And what if that ray is not the same ray as is accompanying the lesser cycle? What if it's not the seventh ray that it would be accompanying the 25,000-year cycle, but some other ray? This is very interesting possibility. See, and the masters, they know all this stuff. And so they can make their plans accordingly. They know how long and energy will be there. You know, let's just say we were talking about windsurfing. If you want to cross over to the island and you know the wind is blowing, so you can do it, but you know that in 1 hour or 45 minutes the wind is going to stop blowing, you make your calculation accordingly, unless you can make it in 15 minutes. I don't know, what'd you say, 15 minutes? We have to all go down to the lake one day and watch Gisela cross over to Vian Island in 15 minutes on a windsurf. I think this will be a very good group project. What would be the astrological factors ruling such an event? Maybe Gemini and a little bit of Mercury, you know, something to stay afloat, little Libra to keep the balance, you know. Okay. All right, I'm off on a tangent, but then again, what else is new? All right. So at this particular time in history, the seventh ray is of growing potency, and it is the new and incoming ray superseding the sixth ray, which has for so long held sway. Now remember, we're told we have 21,000 years left in the present sixth ray cycle, and 40,000 something left in the present fourth ray cycle. So he just throws those in to make us crazy. But anyway, it is amazing thought. When did those cycles begin and when will they end? When we speak of ray energy, we are in reality considering the quality and the will purpose aspect of a certain great life to whom we give the name Lord of a Ray. Okay, so, you know, we want to ask ourselves, who is the Lord of a Ray? And the answer to that is not just one thing, it's two things, and maybe more. Where do the Ray Lords live? What is their address? Where can they be found? Okay, well, why not? Cosmic Mental. But let me start with a closer to home story, that the Ray Lords are the seven spirits before the throne of Shambhala. So they are residing on the cosmic physical plane, but what part of them is residing on the cosmic physical plane? You know, their monadic nature is obviously much higher. They are shambhalic beings, but those are intra-planetary Ray Lords within the planet, and every planet in our system, especially the sacred ones, well, all of the 12 we know about, those planets are Ray Lords. They're all Ray Lords. And they are the seven spirits before the throne of the Solar Logos. Now, does it stop? Does it stop there? Or can we say that the Ray Lords have much higher forms of expression, and ultimately we go up to the seven rishis of the Great Bear, and we can call them Ray Lords as well? Does it stop there? Well, of course it doesn't, and on it goes. The seven Ray Lords probably are the seven spirits before the throne of the one and only universal God. That's finally where it all starts. But for, you know, closer to home, they live in Shambhala. And then out in our solar system, each planetary logos is also a Ray Lord. So what's important to tell is which Ray Lord he means when he's talking about a Ray Lord. You will find much about these Ray Lords in the earlier volume of a Treatise of the Seven Rays. Volume 1 especially. Oh, that's in italics, isn't it? Yes. His divine intention, will, purpose, or the determined projection of his mind creates a radiation or stream of energy which, according to type and quality, plays upon all forms of manifested life within our planetary ring pass knots. So basically he's telling us that the ray lords that he is talking about here are those shambolic beings who are still within our planetary ring pass knot. These lords of the rays are the creating and sustaining energies which implement the will of the planetary logos. So now we are sure of it. The ray lords under discussion are shambolic beings who are less than the planetary logos himself. They may also be less than the Kumaras who live on our planet as well. Someplace, I think they're called the Radiant Seven. Someplace it tells you who lives in Shambhala. I'll show you who lives in Shambhala. You want to know? These are your new neighbors. They live in Shambhala. Oh, what language is that? The Radiant Seven. All right. Now we're talking about a master who's coming into Shambhala or who is entering the Shambhalic stream. Few of the great lives who form the inner council chamber of Shambhala are now of greater advancement than he. This is someone who has entered Shambhala. And now he tells you who's in the council of Shambhala. The supernal three, the radiant seven, the lives embodying the 49 fires, the Buddhas of activity, and certain eternal spirits from such centers of dynamic spiritual life as Sirius, or from the constellation which at any one time forms a triangle with our Sun and Sirius, and also a representative from Venus, are of greater, far greater advancement. So he's just given us the list of very advanced lives in Shambhala. And if you look at this very closely, you will see that Sanat Kumara is not listed. He's the center of the whole thing. But the 7 Kumaras and the Ray lives are listed. And the Kumaras are distinguished from the Ray lives. So there's really 14 of these great lives in Shambhala. Who are the Buddhas of activity Kumaras? Well, yes, they are. They are intraplanetary Kumaras. But are they the only Kumaras within our planet? There are 3 other Kumaras, aren't there? And what are they called? Joe, Frank, and Tom. No, okay. They have names. They have names. It was fantastic. Blavatsky gave names for these beings. It's incredible. She gave names. You want to know their names? Maybe you don't want to know their names, but I think this is a good opportunity to learn their names. So I'm going to look. I should have looked over here, except my glasses won't carry me this far. And oh, you know what? My computer's going to explode if I keep on doing this. Oh, come on. Oh, look at that. Let's just see if I can find that one. There are names like Sananda, Sanantana, Sanjuta. Here they are. I found it. That's pretty good. These are the names of the 6 or 7 of the great Kumaras, along with Sanat, of course. Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara are the chief Vahidrata. The exoteric four are Sanat Kumara, Sananda, Sanaka, and Sanatana, and the esoteric three are Sana, Kapila, and Sanat Sujata. And three of them are the supernal three. Maybe the Hindus knew something, huh? So these are the great Kumaras in the center of Shambhala by those names. Sanat Kumara being strangely called one of the exoteric. So the three Buddhas of activity are the exoteric Kumaras, and the supernal three are the esoteric Kumaras, and they are different from the radiant seven, and the radiant seven are the seven ray lords in Shambhala. Yes. Well, are these lords of karma? They all cooperate to execute karmic purposes according to the will of our planetary logos. But the real lords of karma are coming from Sirius to our planet and into our solar system. They are higher than these beings. They are called the three Lipika lords and the four Maharajas. They are solar systemic beings, and they establish themselves geometrically within the solar system. It's almost like it's a lodge. They stake themselves out at the four corners of the solar system. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff about these lords of karma, but what was my point for going on this tangent? Namely, that the seven ray lords are shambhalic beings. They are called the radiant seven, and they are different from the Kumaras, who have names. So, these must be very powerful names, and of course they probably are not the full name at all. But I'll bet if you aligned with one of these names, if we knew what we were doing, maybe we shouldn't do that. I think not. No, but it would have quite an effect, I would say. DK even warns us about concentrating on a certain constellation lest we bring in too much love energy into the planet and upset the balance. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So these lords of the rays are the creating and sustaining energies which implement the will of the planetary logos. They cooperate with him in defining and the expression of his supreme purpose. So in other words, ray lords, according to their cycles and in Shambhala, are agents of planetary purpose. And different things are accomplished under their in-cycle and their out-cycle. Their radiating emanations are cyclically objectified and cyclically withdrawn. So they are both in incarnation and out of incarnation, and when they are in incarnation, forms reflect their quality. And DK already gave us one of the important examples of this when he said that the blue flowers are going to be disappearing and the purple flowers are going to be in greater number. Because the blue of the sixth ray, that's one of its colors, light blue, is going out and taking its forms with it. And also the violet colored ray is coming in, and its forms will be more numerous now. So in other words, the ray lords are controlling the appearance and disappearance of forms which correspond to their quality. And I'm sure there are many other examples. It may even be more difficult to find gems of a certain kind that are reflecting that color at a certain period. As they radiate forth into the three worlds, the impacting energies produce changes, disturbances, progress, and unfoldment. These are the ray lords. I guess he's giving us a little bit about the ray lords now, so he doesn't have to do it for every initiation. We're talking about the seventh ray lord particularly. They create the needed new forms and vitalize and qualify that through which the immediate divine intention is expressing itself. Okay, they intensify both the quality and the receptivity of consciousness according to their quality. In other words, the whole question of consciousness's receptivity of etheric energy will be greatly augmented during this period. Our contact with the ethers will be especially facilitated by the incoming of the seventh ray. And what about our contact with the cosmic ethers? What do you think? The cosmic ethers are Buddhi, Atma, monadic, logoic. Wouldn't you say it's quite possible that the highest and the lowest meeting under the seventh ray will be facilitated contact with the cosmic ethers also, I would say. Okay. At other times, during the process of being withdrawn to their own place, they cause the fading out or the dying of form aspects or institutions, and the organizing organisms, to use a peculiar phrase. Well, there's right now a lot of churches are being rented out for other purposes. Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, in the old days, you couldn't conceive, if you have a rock and roll concert in the Middle Ages, Notre Dame will not be available. It's still not. But there are many local churches that are available for less than churchly events. You sell churches, so you can have like a house or whatever. I went back to my Mother Masonic Lodge in Fargo, North Dakota. I've been a Mason now for almost 40 years. And I walked in, and there's all these different offices and different organizations. You want to buy a certain kind of water, here's a social activity, blah, blah, blah. In room after room, to keep the building going, the thing was rented to all kinds of organizations. And thus it was when I went into the Masonic Lodge in New York City. These incredible rooms that were built, the Egyptian room, the Babylonian room, all these kinds of things, they are rented out for other things. Well, here it is. The sixth ray is being withdrawn, and the sixth ray approach to many things and the forms that represented them are fading out. So the rays can also produce cycles of destruction and of cessation, which an incoming ray will produce, and thus make room for new forms and life expressions which the incoming ray will produce. So, there's now I want to say this too, that just before a certain quality of energy is withdrawn, there may be a sudden final flourishing of that energy and the forms which represent it. And I think that that's what you are seeing. There's many Christian churches that are going down, but there's many mosques that are going up. And that's what I think you're seeing, a sudden final flourishing before every one of these religions is seen as inadequate compared to the possibilities of the new scientific world religion. And that will mean, the sixth ray approach to religion and all that represented it is on its way out, even if just towards the end it seems like there's a sudden revival. It has been the gradual withdrawing of the sixth ray of idealism and of one-pointed devotion which has been responsible for the ferment, crystallization, destruction, death, and cleavages of the past century. Whoa. The past century in that time was the 19th century, wasn't it? This was not written in the 21st century, I mean, obviously. So this was written in the 20th century, so he's really laying a lot at the doorstep of the sixth ray withdrawal. Crystallization, destruction, death, and cleavages. I don't know how many wars there were in the past, in the 19th century, but there certainly was plenty of crystallization and plenty of cleavages. And he basically said there was a lot then. Yeah, Napoleonic Wars, exactly. and the revolutions in, yes, there was then. There was then. So anyway, the Ray Lords, when they come in, new forms, new expressions. When they go out, death, crystallization, destruction, so forth. Old things are passing away as the Lord of the Sixth Ray withdraws his attention. See, he knows how to make something die, right? That's what we're told. If you want something to die, you just take your eye off it, take your mind, and it dies of attrition by itself. And therefore, his energy. He withdraws his attention and his energy. Energy follows thought. If the Sixth Ray Lord is not interested, the forms in which he was interested fall apart, and thus it will be for every Ray Lord. His radiation is today no longer centered or focused in the life of the three worlds. It's centered elsewhere. So those forms which represented him are falling apart. Simultaneously, the energy and radiation of the Lord of the Seventh Ray are becoming steadily more powerful in the three worlds. So that's something about a ray cycle. A ray cycle involves a period of descent into the three worlds, but also of abstraction of attention into higher worlds and removal of the influence from the lower worlds. It's almost like, rays are following each other like this. Okay, the incoming of a ray always produces an intensified period of initiatory activity, and this is the case today. Now, the word initiatory activity, we have to see whether he means the kind of initiations that we are talking about, or just that new things get started. The major effect as far as humanity is concerned is to make possible the presentation of thousands of aspirants and applicants for the first initiation. The seventh ray coming in is making it possible to present thousands of aspirants and applicants for that initiation which the seventh ray rules. In other words, we're finally going to get physical life straightened out in the lives of these people, and the etheric body will rule rather than the instinctual nature. So this is an important opportunity for the restoration of the mysteries of initiation. The seventh ray will bring that. Aquarius rules the hierarchy, and the seventh ray rules the first initiation. So put those two ideas together. Hierarchy will externally give the first initiation to humanity on the dense physical plane.
Would you say that Europe is approaching the first initiation today, while they're trying to straightening out their financial problems?
That's an interesting theory, and these are definitely etheric issues. Financial, physical plane issues and issues of organization, issues of who's in, who's out, issues of inclusiveness. I think you could say so. You could say so. Usually it's countries that are approaching the initiations, but perhaps larger aggregations can as well. Do you think it will be a success or failure? It's difficult to say. If it is successful, and it is solved through the benefit of the circulation of etheric energy, which is money, and there is sharing, and the union is preserved, I would say there would be a significant step towards this stage that we're talking about. But generally, the individuals precede the groups in initiatory accomplishment. In other words, it's not so rare to find first, second, third degree initiates. It's rather rare to find first, second, third degree groups. So let's see. It's certainly a question of discipleship in a way, isn't it? If everybody falls back into a selfish, go-it-alone attitude, financially considered, then I guess Master R will be a little bit frustrated in his attempts, because he was behind the United States, and I also think he's behind the United Europe. I wonder if he's whispering in any of the ears of the leaders about preserving the Union. So interesting, in America, the major challenge to the Union came 87 years after the Declaration of Independence in America. It was again an economic issue. The whole Civil War was fought on the basis of economics. I wonder if this is not a similar kind of challenge to the United States of Europe, so to speak, to the United Countries of Europe. See, now we had a disciple, a very powerful disciple, in Abraham Lincoln, whose major first-ray intention, even with his second-ray personality, his major first-ray intention was to preserve the Union at all costs. It may have not been the most convenient thing, even the most economically viable thing. It certainly cost millions of lives, but his duty was to preserve this union. Now we have something like this idea playing out in Europe. We don't have slavery exactly as one of the issues about why the war was fought, but we certainly have economic disparity and self-interest. And the question is the union of these European countries more important than the economic welfare of a few of them? See, I'm not a European. I don't know how you think about this, but there is a parallel. And, you know, some people say the union should be preserved, and others say it doesn't make any difference. It's just, it was never a good idea in the first place. Yes.
Unemployment especially in Greece and Italy and Spain, where 40% of the young ones.
40% unemployment in Greece, Italy, and Spain.
Yes.
50. Yeah. Well, that is a lethal combination. The northern part of Europe is doing what? Oh, they're trying to create working, yeah, jobs. Okay. Right. Well, this is a seventh initiation problem. I mean, first initiation, seventh grade problem. This is about the distribution of energy. It's about sharing. It's about breaking bread together. The economical problem is a major first-degree issue for humanity. So there's a deeply spiritual issue going on here in Europe, which it would be wrong to consider just a question of economics only. There's something about relationship going on here. And people say, well, they're so different than we are anyway, and we're like this. And should there be a united Europe? Or should there be? See, Master R seems to think so. Yes. Thinking of European etheric energy system. Yes. It, it, okay, so north is above the diaphragm and south is below. And I guess there has to be the right distribution somehow. You can't starve out centers while other centers are overdone, can you? Yeah. It has to be worked out as a balance. Libra is very important here. You know, because Libra, a great third ray, sort of seventh sign, it's got seventh ray connected with it. It's got to bring the right balance into this situation.
The Mediterranean Sea could also be considered the diaphragm. And then we have Africa.
Well, that's from another point of view. Look, the whole planet is suffering a chakric problem right now. The whole planet. The war that we're in right now is the lower chakras of humanity versus the higher, and finding the right proportion for them. This is, you know, Western civilization pretty much represents the higher chakras. for all the faults that it has. And there's a rebellion against what it represents. Yes. 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 Change from conservative to socialist government. Yes. And that, of course, socialism is Aquarian in nature. Yeah. Yes, I think there's a movement towards it, but of course, well, anyway, not to veer off too much into the politics of it, but let's just say there has to be an enlightened socialism. If there's a permissive socialism, we will lose many, many values, many values. But anyway, okay, look, so thousands of aspirants are taking the first initiation. It may be possible. The income is very. Men on a large scale and in mass formation can today pass through the experience of the birth initiation. Now, men on a large scale and in mass formation. How many is that? Well, I answered what I thought to be the case, but he gives different indications in different places. Thousands of human beings can experience the birth of the Christ within themselves and can realize that the Christ life, the Christ nature, and the Christ consciousness are theirs. How many thousands? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? But anyway, he doesn't put it yet in this reference. He doesn't put it in the millions. He puts it in the thousands. And of course, for the second initiation, it is less. It's like a pyramid, And yet he says there have to be a large number of fifth-degree initiates. It will be necessary on our planet in order to help it make its transition. So even fifth-degree initiates, a large number. What is large? The new birth initiation of the human family will take place in Bethlehem. Symbolically understood for Bethlehem is the house of bread. Well, there you go. And the word bread is another slang word for money. And at least in our country it is. Bread and money are the same. How much bread does it cost? See, like that. An occult term signifying physical plane experience that the seventh ray correlates with. These great initiations, implemented by the ray energies, must be registered in the physical brain. This is the usual case anyway. Registered in the physical brain, recorded by the waking consciousness of the initiate, eventually recorded anyway, and this must be the case in this amazing period wherein for the first time since humanity appeared on Earth, there can take place a mass initiation. Well, he uses thousands, not millions, but he still calls it a mass initiation. This is the great opportunity before humanity now. That it will be done in consciousness? Well, don't the two things go together? That if something is happening internally to the energy system, it will affect the consciousness and vice versa. To me, it seems that the two things must necessarily occur together. There will be an elevation of human consciousness into the idea of the Christ in the heart, meaning right human relations, which is the major theme of Shambhala at this time. And at the same time, there will be certain physiological changes that will accompany this. And if you're saying that the consciousness aspect is the most important, I would agree with you. I would say that to get a number of thousands of people with this type of consciousness aspect is a major thing for bringing about the right conditions on our planet. And by the way, he says elsewhere that when the Christ reappears, it will be confirmation that the first initiation of humanity has occurred. And so this also tells us something. Yeah. Hey, well, we still have a few months, and Well, I think the whole thing has been put back a bit, so it could be 100 years. I mean, it's hard to say, but as close as the coming of Christ is, so close is the first initiation of humanity. So we're talking about something fairly imminent here. It's coming. So there can take place anyway a mass initiation. The largest number of initiates in the human family at this time will be found in relation to the first initiation. The experience need not be recognized or expressed in occult terms, and in the majority of cases will not be. In other words, a lot of people who do this, who are fired up with the spirit of right human relations and all of that, won't know a thing about the occultism that we are talking about. Matter of fact, there's a lot of students of occultism that maybe won't even be able to take the first initiation because their heart is not, alive. What I want to, this might be the moment to read what DK calls the requirements for the first initiation. Unfortunately, my computer is so sluggish at this moment. Okay, I'm going to put this over here. Oh, it doesn't work. It's not working. Okay, well, let's see. First initiation. Let's try that. Okay, first initiation. You see, okay, well, first initiation. Here are 3 great requirements. There are really 6, and I have them somewhere. But at least I'll give you the 3 great requirements for the first initiation. Well, instead of running around, I'll just give you what I've got. There are other things, and as soon as I get my computer to behave, the first initiation is within the reach of many, but the necessary one-pointedness and the firm belief in the reality ahead, coupled to a willingness to sacrifice all rather than turn back, are deterrents to many. Now, this is not the thing I thought it was, but he said these are obviously requirements. One-pointedness, the firm belief in the reality, and a willingness to sacrifice all rather than to turn back. Now, that's not the one I was looking for. Oh, here's one. Here's something. Here it is. Members of the new group of world servers, who are considered to be basically already second-degree initiates, the real members of the servers, are supposed to look out for first and second-degree initiates that they can help. In other words, if you're simply a man or woman of goodwill, it doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a member of the new group of world servers. So here's what DK says. Members of the new group of world servers should watch with care for all those who show signs of having passed through the birth experience and should help them move towards greater maturity. They should assume that all those who truly love their fellow men, who are interested in the esoteric teaching, and I guess I would say also generally spiritual and self-improvement teaching, something that elevates. I don't want to just isolate this to esoteric. Interested in the esoteric teaching and who seek to discipline themselves in order to attain greater beauty of life are initiate and have undergone the first initiation. There are other qualifications too, but these are the first 3. They love their fellow men, they're interested in some sort of elevating teaching, and they seek to discipline themselves in order to attain greater beauty of life. They are initiate. When the new group of world servers people discover those who are seeking mental polarization and who evidence a desire and aspiration to think and to know, coupled with the distinguishing marks of those who have taken the first initiation, they can, in all probability, safely assume that such people have taken the second initiation or are on the verge of doing so. So this is a very important reference from page 667 of the book that we're dealing with here, the rays and the initiations. And, it doesn't sound like so much, but you could trip over the very first one about truly loving your fellow man. It's like the very first rule for applicants is let the disciples search within the heart's deep cave. If there the fire burns bright, warming his brother, yet heating not himself, the hour has come for him to make application to stand before the door. You could trip over that one right there. Many well-meaning people, will trip over the love of their fellow men. So anyway, page 667 is how he looks at this. You don't have to be an esotericist, and you don't have to know all the details. But love of your fellow men, interest in literature which uplifts, and discipline. These are the distinguishing features. Even a what? Atheist? Well, I'll bet there are atheists who are a lot higher initiates than some of those who are religious dogmatics. Because it's, don't forget, the atheist of the present may have been a religious devotee of the past. It's a reaction. It's a reaction from being fooled, misled, disappointed. We're finally going to straighten things out with the mind. So several lives of disbelief may come in while you, so to speak, emphasize humane values. You become a humanist, atheist humanist. It can be quite a high stage of initiation. It can indicate the first initiation. You can love your fellow man and still be an atheist. And it doesn't talk about what you believe in. You can read uplifting literature, what you think will produce a better society, and still be an atheist. You can discipline yourself so you live a good life and still be an atheist. So, like I say, man makes God in his own image. And so according to the quality of our mentality and of our inner aesthetic, we will define the nature of the divine or what is valuable. There are many brilliant atheists who just have a particular ceiling on the extension of their thought, but they can be very good people. And initiatorily, why should they not be initiates of the first degree? They would be shocked, however, if we were to say meaningfully to them, and yes, you have met the Christ in the chamber of initiation. That's an astonishing thing. Of course, look, there's probably some of the chief Nazis who also met the Christ in the chamber of initiation, and that's the horrific thing. If they are initiates of first degree or even second degree, and they get so full of themselves that they veer off onto the left-hand path, they have all also met the Christ in the chamber of initiation, which tells us something about the degree of free will which is allowed on our planet. It's quite amazing. Nietzsche's fine. God isn't dead, and he knows it. I mean, well, he knows it now. No, the old story. It's written on a tombstone. God is dead. Nietzsche. Nietzsche is dead. God. It's what you call having the last word. But, we go through these particular phases of rejection of something that we once accepted wholeheartedly. There are these counterbalancing phases in certain sections of life. So you have no idea whether the idealistic atheist of the present moment wasn't the idealistic religious of a previous age. We've all been atheists, meaning we went through a period of mental focus where the mind became God, and we wanted not to be fooled into being gullible. And then you rediscover God through the mind, and then you're in a more powerful position. Okay. We have to be careful about saying that only theosophists can be initiates. I mean, which seemed to be a thing into which some theosophists fell at a certain time of their development. DK said the whole thing was dragged way down because it turned out to be Leadbeater and his friends who were going to be the Mahachohan and everybody else, And of course, other people have done that too. There have been certain religious groups where the leader arranges your future bodhisattvahood, Mahachohanship, and how you will get there. So, it's terribly glamorous and foolish, but I think we cannot blame people for limitation. We're in no position to do that because we certainly ourselves could be criticized for all of our limitations. Okay, I'm just trying to get back to my text here. Anyway, those are some of the requirements for the first initiation. More people of the kind that we are dealing with should be visible as initiates of the first degree, or at least having taken that. The evidence should be there. And there'll be a lot of emphasis on the physical disciplines, too. Which he tells you, okay, they're fine, but later you don't want to get too stuck in them. Just use them as a basis. Discipline of some kind or another, the enhancement of life, the enhancement of the quality of life, the belief that humanity can be better than it is, and you're working on that, and you actually do love your fellow human beings, those are distinguishing features. Right. Now, I have so many documents open. This is always the third-rate problem. Too many things going at the same time. Okay. The experience, however, of the first initiation need not be expressed in occult terms, and in most cases will not be. So if we look for first-degree initiates to be people like ourselves in some esoteric group, studying our particular authors, then that's not very inclusive, is it? The individual initiate who takes this initiation is aware of great changes in his attitude to himself, to his fellow men, to circumstances, and to his interpretation of life events. Let's see how this is the case. These are peculiarly the reactions which attend the first initiation. It's a big, my classic example from literature of the first initiation is the story of the Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Scrooge goes to bed an average person and wakes up as a first-degree initiate. Of course, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? There's a complete turnaround in his attitude towards his fellow men. Complete. It's just like obviously the psychology of a Scrooge is someone who's terribly disappointed and therefore has become so hardened. He had a lot of capability in the early days and was even a fairly good person, but it got more and more cramped. And then when he saw the consequences overnight of his actions, he wakes up converted, a real conversion. And he then fulfills everything that is found here. Obviously, he's going to be a benefactor of people. He's going to work on that for the rest of his life. It's totally different. So, like he says here, there is those who take this initiation are aware of a great change in his attitude towards himself, to his fellow men, to circumstances, and his interpretation of events. Of course, I'm not saying that being born again through an emotional decision in the religious sense is necessarily an indication of the first initiation, but to me it's an indication of being on the path towards that type of initiation. I think it may take a few lives or whatever for a lot of the born-again types, but then again, most of them are taking the initiation on the sixth ray. So, in other words, they are sixth-ray souls taking that initiation. So we have to make allowance for the way the initiation will appear in the ray structure of different people. In other words, different types of soul rays will give evidence of a different type of experience in relation to this initiation. And it may be easier or harder for some people to take it than others. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the mental rays will have a harder time somehow with this initiation, just like they have an easier time with the second initiation. That gets back to your idea of, you know, if you have a particular type of ray, what is the speed or the ease with which you can accomplish that particular goal. So it's going to be really important for us to be able to actually isolate and study initiates on the different soul rays who have taken these initiations and see how they do it. It's almost much easier for me to describe how a third or fourth initiation would be taken by the 7 soul ray types than how a first initiation would be taken by those types. But I can, in my mind, I could maybe imagine a little of how it would be. But we could do that sometime. These are peculiarly the reactions which attend the first initiation: a new orientation to life and a new world of thought are registered by the initiate, and oftentimes a great enthusiasm, because it is like being born again. It is the second birth in a way. They have been individualized and they entered the 4th kingdom. Now they're celebrating, they're entering the 5th, and they're full of optimism about the new and spiritual life. Do you know people that you think may have been passing through this? Because many of you work with people who are, let's just say, that if you really stick with the esoteric study and all that, it kind of indicates that you've been through this, But one of DK's disciples, even though a very enthusiastic guy, had not yet taken the first initiation. So that's kind of interesting. Just because he loved the teaching and being 6th ray could talk about nothing else, did not to anybody. He says whenever you meet anybody, you're only interested in talking about the teaching. You only approach them from the point of view of the teaching. So obviously he was the victim of his own fanaticism in this particular case. He had not taken the first degree. He was a 3rd ray soul. See? It's easier sometimes, I think, for the birth of the Christ in the heart center emphasized, to take it than the intellectual types who can't quite make that leap of faith, But then, like we were talking about atheists, 3rd ray, 5th ray types, they usually constitute the major atheists, the mental types. They can find another way to be useful and loving to their fellow men, or helpful, philanthropy, or whatever, scientific discovery to help people, medical research, whatever. These are ways of helpfulness, even inventing things that just make life easier and better for people. These are ways of helping your fellow man. This will be equally true on a large scale where modern man, the world initiate of the 1st degree, is concerned. So he's talking about the day when humanity will be reoriented and will have a new world of thought and a new attitude. Men will recognize the evidences in many lives of the emergence of the Christ consciousness, and the standard of living will increasingly be adjusted to the truth as it exists in the teachings of the Christ. what does that suggest to you about our economic situation? The standard of living. Well, of course, it can mean more than economics, but I think it may mean that. I think we're really talking about sharing. We're really talking about, the seventh ray types control, he says somewhere, the things by which men live. So you need certain things. Seventh ray controls those things and the distribution of those things. And he says that as you look to the future, and this is now 70 years ago, there will be a redistribution of world resources. And we are in the process of seeing it happen right now. Can it be that the rich countries have too much and the poor countries have too little? Can it be that there are very wealthy, powerful people who are cornering the market under the third ray, irrespective of what anybody else has or doesn't have, and feel that they earned it and they are entitled to it, which is a very narrow separative view. See, these things have to be straightened out. There's going to be a huge rebellion against, in other words, as things get harder and harder for the average person, there's going to be a huge rebellion against those who are, you can use this word like obscenely rich, meaning that it's almost a sin to be sitting on so much without helping. Of course, some of the very wealthy people help tremendously. You look at Bill Gates and some of those people, and I don't know about Warren Buffett, but he has his, a lot of these people really extend their largesse into the world tremendously. But there are others who it's just for me, 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 me. So the whole ego is the problem. Ego and desire is the problem. Okay. So we're dealing with somehow the economic issue and what the developing Christ consciousness will do with that issue of sharing. After all, breaking bread together in the upper room of the soul in the Aquarian age, this is all about sharing. And when did he say the Christ would come? When the church cleans house. Well, whether the church wants to or not, the church is being forced to clean house, okay? Okay, well, okay, so this is a thing he actually talks about, the Vatican's financial manipulation, because he says that the Catholic Church has a third-rate personality. So this will make France and China its ally. But anyway, this is this is another thing. The church has to clean house, so the whole thing about the child abuse in the church is the major thing, and it's been coming up. And all of the devious financial manipulations are going to be coming up. There has to be a relative measure of peace in the world based on goodwill, not complete, but a reasonable measure of peace based on goodwill, and financial sharing. That's the third requirement. A degree of sharing between countries, between peoples, before the Christ can return visibly into visibility. So you can see some of these things are happening. They may not be happening completely, but at least the eye of humanity is upon them right now.
It's happening very rapidly because the jobs are created in China and not in the Western Hemisphere.
And that's going to be part of the jobs being created in China is part of what he called the redistribution of world resources. So China's just bought a bank in America. Look, China is a Taurus third-rate country. Third-rate, first-rate. China is missing the second ray. Except if you want to look at, Venus, or it does have Venus. as the ruler of both of its signs, Libra and Taurus. But, China, and don't forget China, its soul sign is square to Aquarius. So it's one of, so obviously when you look at soul signs which are in the harmonious aspects to Aquarius or in difficult aspects with Aquarius, you'll find something about the future indicated. So anyway, the developing Christ consciousness in the masses of men will create necessarily a ferment in the daily life of people everywhere, meaning there's going to be a lot of commotion, a lot of change. He says Confucius is coming. So watch out, China. He says, he who was Confucius and is a member of the hierarchy will be born in China and will create a disturbance. Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah. So, so the Danes send a delegation. How to create homes for old people. Then we can all move there. Do you think they have enough old people of their own? How do you spell Confucius? U-C... Confucius 4. 4 Confuciuses. Okay, even today, the universal veneration, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Buddha, blah, blah, blah. Members of the hierarchy. Confucius taught us centuries ago that implements of civilization were highly spiritual in nature, for they were the result of ideas, etc. Okay, finally, when a movement is instituted by the Lodge working in connection with the fourth root race, it will also be part of the stimulative process and will result in the rendering radioactive of some of the foremost thinkers of the fourth root race. It will be their day of opportunity, and so great is the importance attached to this that a member of the Lodge, Confucius, as he has been called in the past, will incarnate in order to superintend the work. The preliminary steps are being taken now, and egos are coming in who will endeavor to direct the energies of the race on the right lines towards the peak of the cycle of stimulation, though the peak will not be until the middle of the next century. It is needless for me to point out that all such movements are first felt as disturbing. But only when the dust of turmoil and the noise of clashing forces have died away will purpose be seen emerging. And then he talks about Russia of the present day. So Confucius is on his way back, and a disturbance will be created. Will he incarnate? Well, he is already a 5th degree initiate, so will he incarnate? I don't know, but maybe he will be known to certain of those who are implementing changes in China. So even though China right now is looking very economically aggressive and militarily fortifying, and the motives are power because of its first race soul, the hierarchy has plans for that country. And when a member of the hierarchy incarnates in or supervises a particular country, big changes will occur. It may be interesting to realize that Master Jesus is said to live in Syria at the present moment. Well, a particularly distressing condition is existing there. What would it lead to? And Syria is supposed to be one of those places where a new esoteric school is to appear. Oh, Syria and Greece. Both of them are in big trouble for different reasons, and those are the possible homes, or one of them will be the definite home of one of the new preparatory esoteric schools. So sometimes when there's a real disturbance going on, it's an indication that something is underneath it all to make that disturbance, and a good effect can emerge. Well, that's interesting. Confucius, yes, yes. Mao came in. We know one thing, that Mao is not the incarnation of Confucius. We know that. I'm not sure what ray Confucius may have been on. Maybe the seventh ray, something, one of the hardline rays, I suppose. Maybe the seventh ray. I wonder. The whole idea of the etiquette angle of his teaching was tremendous. Mao was the enemy of the Dharma, said the Dalai Lama. The enemy of Confucius, obviously. Confucius was purged. Mao must have been one of the old Chinese emperors, and they were like absolute in their power. But still, there was a revolution, and it can be evaluated what the final result of his work, of him as a disciple of Shambhala, actually was. Anyway, ferment will be created in the daily lives of people everywhere. The life of the personality oriented hitherto to the attaining of material and purely selfish ends will be at war with the new and inner realization. The United States is ripe for such a realization as this, but so are so many of the wealthier countries in the Western world. In other words, wanting material stuff for what he calls purely selfish ends, and if you earn it, it's yours. This attitude will be challenged. The carnal man, to use the words of St. Paul, the initiate, will be battling the spiritual man. Each will be seeking to achieve control. And this is happening in the world now, and just watch the next 12 years. This will be a time of great economic questioning and uncertainty. And Capricorn is one of the major economic signs. It has to do with the whole material structure of things and the law which supports those things. In the early stages, after the birth and during the infancy of the Christ child, again speaking in symbols, the material aspect is triumphant in the early days. Later, as the Christ life triumphs, this you well know. Later, the Christ life triumphs, this you well know. Each initiation indicates a stage in the growth and development of this new factor in human consciousness and expression, and this continues until the third initiation, when there emerges the full-grown man in Christ. Now, we can call it that way if he likes. Sometimes the third initiation is called the rich young man, and the second initiation, the young man. So DK said, I was a young man then, meaning he was the second degree initiate. When he had that big problem with Master Kuthumi, when Master Kuthumi said, I want to point something out to you about your so-called devotion to me. It's really devotion to yourself. And DK protested mightily, and then later found out that Master KH was correct. So sometimes I think the full-grown man in Christ is more like the fourth degree. But okay, this is what DK says. The initiate is then ready at the fifth initiation to register, realize, and record the long-awaited revelation. To me, the fullest grown man in Christ is the fifth degree initiate. Five-pointed star, the heart, the acme and head, the head of the human kingdom. Because we're told a master is a human being, a Chohan is not. A man, a Chohan is not. So that to me looks like the apex of being the human being. In connection with the individual in the first initiation, the seventh ray is always active. Well, he doesn't say that a particular sign is always active, but the seventh ray is always active. And the man is enabled consciously to register the fact of initiation because either the brain or here it is. This is what I was looking for. Because either the brain or the mind, and frequently both, are controlled by the seventh ray. There it is. He can register the fact of initiation. But, of course, elsewhere he tells us that the first initiation is often forgotten as a ceremony. Many people have been through it, they just don't remember. And even the second ray, the same thing. But here he talks about some, apparently, who do register the fact of initiation in the brain. Will they necessarily remember every detail and facing the Christ and so forth, or will they just see the effects in themselves in that sense? So this is not, usually he says you've got a first ray mind, a fourth ray mind, a fifth ray mind, and that's it, unless, of course, you are on the path. Now, obviously, a first degree initiate is on the path, right? Obviously, been on the path for some time. So you can have a seventh ray mind. And that, we have to really look carefully at how people think, the degree of order in their thinking, the degree of clarity, the degree of habit patterned thinking, the expected response, and so forth, using the seventh ray as an example. It is this fact which is of importance today in connection with humanity, for it will enable mankind to pass through the door, admitting them to the first initiatory process. So far what we have is the discussion of mass initiation, mankind passing through, and also thousands of people. Thousands, mankind, and what was the other one? What did I say? Thousands pass through, mankind passes through, and, well, that's the idea. Many. I lost the exact word. To connect with humanity, for enable mankind to pass through the door, admitting them to the first initiatory process. It will be apparent to you why the present period in which human beings in large groups, mass initiation, that was the other. He said mass and groups, as if they will all be overshadowed somehow by that possibility. And maybe in the brain, it will seem that that fact in their energy system will make them have a dream in which somehow the Christ and the factors involved in initiation will present themselves to the consciousness of the individual. If you think about it, do you think the Christ and the angel and all members of the hierarchy could run around enough to initiate thousands of people on the various nights? There has to be some kind of psychological mechanism which allows the whole internal theme of initiation to be outpictured in the particular consciousness with the power of the initiator also present. It's like Christ has to replicate himself in some way. I have a feeling this can be done. It doesn't make sense if there were even millions. The Christ there wouldn't be enough days or nights to do it. So there has to be a way in which the initiator actually is present in the consciousness and replicates himself in an energy specific way to bring about those changes in the consciousness and energy system of the individual. And one day we will know how this is done. Okay, it will be apparent to you why the present period in which human beings in large groups can take the first initiation corresponds to a situation in which bread is the major interest of men everywhere. Our economic problem. We're talking about it right now. We're not talking about whether it's white bread, rye bread, whole ground wheat. This is a wider symbol. I know to the health food nut, not even nut, but to the one who really cares, the kind of bread you eat is important. But this is a symbol of that by which man lives, the energy by which man lives. So we have an old saying, and you will recognize it. Maybe you have it in your language too. And this saying goes like this: bread is the staff of life. In other words, without bread, life falls down. bread is the energy which upholds the life process. So, bread is food. It's the symbol for food, and it's the symbol for money. Humanity will pass through this birth initiation and manifest the Christ life on a large scale for the first time during a period of economic adjustment, of which the word bread is a symbol. Well, we're in the middle of it right now. This is happening. The period started in the year 1825. Does that period strike you as important? Does that year strike you as important? I once did an analysis of all these different years. This is a big year for the... Okay, you're quite right. It was a convocation for the hierarchy every 100 years. Yes, of course it was. And it was exactly the midway point for the 500-year cycle of the second ray, which began in 1575, and the year of a Shambhala impact. So there was a major first ray impulse then, and in 1875, 1825, one of the Shambhala impacts. Okay, wait a second, something's going on here. I'm hearing someone in a room.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, dear. Oh, it's my wife again. Hi, dear. Okay. Right. Okay, we just have to stay on the mute, otherwise I hear everything. So anyway, bread. So 1825 started all these social movements. The Napoleonic Wars were over, and Neptune was going to be discovered within 20 years, and all of these, and the fantastic artists were coming in, and musicians and all of that, in hierarchy's attempt to ward off the imminent materialism, which actually was instituted by Bismarck. He said, and I don't know if we know enough history to agree or disagree, he said that Bismarck was responsible for manifesting materialism and was an avatar of the Black Lodge in doing so. Bismarck, to me, I think there's been a big contest on our planet between three planets: our Earth in the middle, Venus above, and Mars below. The German militarism, which came in force with German nationalism in the end of the 19th century, was the representation of Mars. Venus has been all of the soul-inclined social ameliorations which have tried to make the life of humanity better. And we're still fighting now between the militant religions that represent Mars and the more enlightened states of social relations which Venus represents. It's clear that the fate of women is the symbol of who's winning the battle. If we fall back into the Martian method of patriarchy, we've lost the battle. If women bring in the New Age and we succeed in gaining across the world the rightful rights of women, the soul has won. And we're right in the middle of the battle now. That's why we cannot afford to go back to Mars. Mars is a lower planet in terms of its development than the Earth. You know that in the symbols because the Earth is the circle with the cross, but Mars is the cross over the circle, and Venus is the circle over the cross. So it's a very, very heavy situation. But anyway, in 1825, with the Shambhala impact, first ray got going. The Industrial Revolution in full steam, and iron and matter and Vulcan and all that kind of stuff got going. And at the same time, social welfare movements under the second ray got going. And this period, he says, of the Christ impulse came in 1825. This period started in the year 1825 and will continue until the end of this century. That's interesting because there has been in many ways a lessening of respect for the second ray in the 21st century compared with the end of the 20th century. There was a great consciousness movement at the end of the 20th century, the last 35 years, when the period of the Forerunner began, and the Christ took over the vestures of the Buddha. In other words, those etheric vehicles, cosmic etheric vehicles, which the Buddha had left, the Christ assumed them in 1966, huge consciousness movement. About 35 years of the second ray really blossoming. Now it is on the wane. The people who represent it are getting older, and the question is, can there be enough continuity to the year 2025 to help humanity's transition into the Aquarian age without being overcome by all the other rays that do not emphasize the heart in the same way. So this is a big job for people on the second ray. The unfoldment of the Christ life, as a result of the presence and activities of the second divine aspect of love, will result in the ending of economic fear. One of the four freedoms, right? This is one of the four freedoms. And will result in, and the house of bread will become the house of plenty. What an interesting prediction. And we have one of the four freedoms is freedom from want. So he said that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that great disciple, emphasized as much of the Shambhala way of life as possible for humanity at present.
Are we lagging behind? Apparently, she thinks that at the end of this century, we will see the ending of economic fear.
No, he's not saying that. Not to me. He's saying the second divine aspect of love is going to remain in force until the end of the century. Now we'll have to look for the second ray from another source. This is a particular cycle. So you can ask, are we lagging behind, and have we not used the second divine ray to produce the circumstance that we need? See, because I do think we are lagging behind. But it's not that this will necessarily happen at the end of the century. It's just that the energy to work with it is there until the end of the century. He says the day of opportunity will not always be with us. Now, I do think we actually have until the year 2175 to get our house in order. In this way, that the second ray cycle is 500 years in duration. When did it begin? You know when it began. Just subtract 500 years from 2075 and you get 1575, right? I believe, I think I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Let's just see. We turn to page 26 in Esoteric Psychology 1. That's correct, isn't it? Ray 2, in manifestation since 1575. Ray 3, in manifestation since 1425, the Renaissance, the awakening of the intellectual spirit of man. Ray 4, to slowly come into manifestation after 2025 in its monadic aspect. Ray 5, in manifestation since 1775, having to be withdrawn in 1950. And 1950 was exactly 175 years after its inception. This is very interesting because according to Stephen Pugh, it's a 350-year cycle. 2 times 175, 350. So we were not allowed, apparently, to see the full 350-year cycle. It was withdrawn in 50 years instead of 175 years. Ray 6 passing out since 1625, coincidentally very close to the death of Francis Bacon. When did he die? 1616, something like that. And Ray 7 in manifestation since 1675. And, well, at least in music, Keith Bailey is fond of pointing out that Bach was born in 1685, and so was Handel, born in 1685. They both have a tremendous order in their music. And Bach, of course, is the genius of architectural order. Anyway, there are many evidences of these ray cycles. They're not the only ray cycles, but they are the ones that relate to the race of humanity. So anyway, have all of these things been fulfilled? Well, maybe not. And maybe things are very dangerous right now, but this is what DK anticipates. It's certainly so that there was a great second ray impulse starting in 1966. It was very, very big. It's what some people call the 60s, the 1960s. They call it that. That was a huge second ray impulse. But we still have until 2075 before that ray goes out of incarnation. At the same time, we have Aquarius coming in with at least Jupiter representing the esoteric people of the world. So the second ray should be kept alive then, and when the Christ himself reappears with the hierarchy, whatever other energies are present, that in itself is a huge second ray impulse. Very, very strong. So bread, the house of bread will become the house of plenty and economic fear, which is rampant in the world today, will subside. We don't see any sign of it immediately. Bread as the symbol of material human need will eventually be controlled by a vast group of initiates of the first initiation, and by the way, they will be largely initiates on the seventh ray. We're told elsewhere. I don't know if they will be the bankers of the present. Perhaps not. The bankers of the present seem very infected by a certain interpretation of the third ray, it seems to me. Now, some people like to make a big distinction between the third ray and the seventh, and they say seventh ray is good and third ray is bad. Okay. However, they forget that Master R is on the third ray more fundamentally than he is on the seventh ray. Master R is a seventh ray soul and a third ray monad. As the Maha Chohan, what else could you be? And we are told that he took with him, when he changed into being the Maha Chohan, his initiates of the second and third initiation onto the third ray with him by special dispensation. So we must not think the third ray is bad and seventh ray is good. There's a lot more to it than that. So bread will be the symbol of human need. It will be controlled by a vast group of initiates of the first initiation, by those whose lives are beginning to be controlled by the Christ consciousness, which is the consciousness of responsibility and service. So simple, so clear, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're a believer or an atheist. You can still be controlled by the Christ consciousness. Okay, responsibility and service, and you can understand that initiates of the seventh ray and the first initiation will want to share the things by which men live. So right now, it's a terrible thing, makes me sick, maybe it makes you sick, when you think about how much food is thrown away in the West, and how they won't even I've heard stories that they even sometimes, because poor people were coming and getting it, they started to poison the food that they threw away. Or they let it be known that you cannot eat this because we've contaminated this food. So rather than share, they poison it. And, so that's a big sin, and to waste the way we do, see, that's going to be overcome. That has to be overcome. These initiates exist in their thousands today. And here's another contradictory statement. They will be present in their millions by the time the year 2025 arrives. So basically he's saying here that there can be millions of first degree initiates and even on the seventh ray, millions. So from thousands, he goes to millions. Who knows what's going to happen in our next years? It sounds like, if his prophecy is correct, there's going to be a tremendous initiatory ingathering over the next 12, 13 years, if his prophecy is correct. I know we have to take a break soon. All this reorientation and unfoldment will be the result of the activity of the seventh ray and of the impact of its radiation upon humanity. So it's a very important ray for the transition we have to make and for the initiates who are forthcoming who are needed to help make this transition. It's a very practical thing in the life of humanity now. Are there any questions? Because we are just on the verge of our break and saying goodbye to Gisela, who will be leaving us now, just when the mysteries of initiation are about to be revealed. Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, well, we're going to continue with this. We don't have to go back to the other one. We'll continue with this chapter, and we will see. Actually, we're halfway through it. We might even finish it this afternoon. Knock off the first initiation. Okay, so go have some pleasant moments together, and then come back. All right.